and we're back with what's kind of a continuation of a previous series I've covered. After the original 3 Ys games, Masaya Hashimoto and Tomoyoshi Miyazaki would leave Falcom to make games with their new company, Quintet, abandoning the realm of PC-88 action RPGs into the new frontier of the Super Nintendo under NX's umbrella. I originally intended to only cover the Soul Blazer trilogy, Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma, but I thought that since we'd already covered the first 3 Ys games led by these developers, we might as well go all in. So let's literally dive in. Actraiser starts out quite simple. You choose a name for yourself as the Master, and descend down from the heavens, your Sky Palace, to clear the realm of any demons obstructing the revival of mankind. Once you clear a stage, you change over to your assistant, an angel helper, aiding humanity's progress, playing a god sim. It is a simple loop, but for a game released in 1990, it's kinda nuts that a console game would even switch back and forth between such extreme styles of gameplay so frequently. While it isn't new for games to have a different style or perspective between action and town scenes, genre mix-ups like these were quite a novelty at the time. During the action stages, you make your way through acts that feel not too dissimilar from something like a classic Castlevania stage. It isn't so much a platformer as it is a side-scrolling action-adventure game. You even have a very stiff-feeling jump, though you do get some control over it. To me, having the kind of control you have here feels more off than having the full stiff classic Castlevania jump. The most control you get is slowing down your momentum mid-jump, which to my brain only stresses how stiff jumping actually feels. The level design doesn't really call for this kind of control either, at least most of the time. Though in the original Japanese release, having this level of control does make more sense, all things considered. There aren't really that many obstacles or precision-style jumping that requires you to have further control than just moving ahead. And yes, I did play the Japanese version too, and we're going to touch on that later. The flow of the stages in Actraiser is a bit strange. You can kind of rush through most of the levels and be perfectly safe. You're likely to lose more health standing your ground and fighting enemies. Rushing through enemies with full confidence gets you further ahead most of the time, especially considering a lot of them have projectiles that you cannot block. Some enemies will also rush at you and take more than one hit to take down, so you might as well take the opportunity to walk past them when they do this. There's a good number of health items scattered through the stages, hidden away inside of these religious-looking statues. Enough of them that you can get away with a very aggressive playstyle and still be mostly okay. There's also a spell system based on scrolls. Spells cost 1 scroll, and scrolls can be found during the stages. So once you get to a boss, you can often very quickly melt them down with your spells once you've collected a bunch of scrolls. The boss fights are a bit odd. Most of them aren't too hard, but their patterns can be quite annoying. At the very least, everything about the side-scrolling action, the feeling of platforming, fighting the bosses, all of it is a massive step up from the original Ys 3. Which is fair to say, considering this game was led by the same director and writer duo, leading a project on a platform that was new to them. Gameplay-wise, it's still not the best though. If anything, I feel the side-scrolling stages are largely held up by their atmosphere, which is hugely in thanks to the visuals and music. Music that is, once again, by Ayano Koshiro. We really need to stop running into this guy on this channel. I cover a lot of games with good music, and somehow that means he always shows up. The theme that plays during Fillmore's act is the real standout track here, and I don't think anything else in the soundtrack really hits it out of the park quite like it. And if you like Fillmore's theme, Yuzo went back to it a while ago to make a song based on it for Inugami Korone. It's very good. And I feel like this is a good moment to bring up that Yuzo wasn't the only Koshiro involved in the creation of this game. His sister, Ayano Koshiro, was a part of the visual team. A lot of games that Yuzo famously worked on back in the day, Ayano was a massive part of as well. It's a note worth highlighting because people tend to gloss over her presence. Actraiser has some especially nice parallax scrolling going on during most stages, and it's a gorgeous effect. I always like the detail where you start and end stages by putting your soul in and out of the statue of yourself that was already in the area. It kind of suggests that something like this has happened before and that these statues are in the area waiting for you to come down once again. That the Lord coming down to save humanity is a cyclic event, one that reoccurs over time. Something that seems even more likely when you consider the direction that Quintet's later games would go into. When you start out, you're even told that you were sealed away and lost your powers. That your journey is one to reclaim your former glory while helping humanity get back up on their feet along the way, meaning you were already all-powerful at some point in the past, that you already had humanity following your lead, and now you're on your way to retrieve what you've lost. This is what you do during the God Sim sections. Supposedly, these sections were heavily inspired by the original Populous, simply because the lead planner was into that game at the time. The Sim section is where you take control of your assistant Angel and choose what direction your loyal followers will build their town in. In the meantime, the villagers will be attacked by flying demons that you have to shoot down. These demons can also damage you, though there is no major penalty for running out of HP. You just lose the ability to shoot for a little while until your health recovers. The goal during the Sim sections is to guide your followers to build their town towards the monster spawn points, so they can seal them up themselves. And as the village grows, you level up, giving you more health and power, which is how you get stronger during the action stages. In a way, mankind's population is your experience points. Sealing monster spawn points, or at least making your way towards them, usually triggers special events. Something will happen to the people in the village and they'll want you to clear up some minor side goal, like using your magic to make the wind blow so that the windmills can move, or saving a lost child. It's simple, but it gives the game a lot of charm, contextualizing your journey into these action stages with more weight than a cutscene or a bunch of text on a screen ever could do. There's also something kind of close to the feeling of playing one of these idle games where you see your number going up, playing the Sim sections. That villager number is going up and the screen space fills up with houses. The village's civilization level has increased. They've learned to build bridges, form communities and lasting bonds, share technology between each other. Look, they can even grow wheat now. Yeah, that's definitely wheat and not something else. Like, look at this wheat field. Think of all the bread we can make from the grains that are being harvested from here. The Sim sections are very simple, but there is something strangely addictive about it. Once you've progressed through the Sim portion of an area enough, you end up hitting a dead end. Some catastrophe will strike and it's time to head into the area's second action stage to seal the deal and finish off the last remaining monsters. Afterwards, you can usually grow the town just a little bit further. If you've got enough SP, you might want to use the Earthquake spell to level all the low-quality housing so they'll rebuild something better in those spaces. Thankfully, the high-level civilization housing doesn't crumble when you use a simple Earthquake. Wait, hold up, did it just destroy a bunch of random buildings instead? So this is the fun secret of Actraiser. You know how a lot of games back in the day were made much harder when they released in the West to combat rental? Actraiser kind of had the reverse going on. The Western release was much easier than the Japanese one. It also has a lot of quality of life changes and improvements in general, though that part is common. Western releases often still had a few extra months in the oven. But the difficulty adjustments are a bit strange to see. In the Japanese original, stages have way more spikes in them, and spikes no longer just make you take a hit, they instantly kill you. There's more enemies and they're often much more aggressive. The bosses are mostly the same, but magic works differently in the Japanese version. Every spell has its own required scroll count, so you can't just spam the star spell on repeat to melt down bosses really fast. It costs more than one scroll now. This makes bosses much harder, since you actually have to fight them properly now. The entire action part of the game is so much harder than the original that I was actually shocked playing it. The Sim portion of the game has some major changes too. On Wikipedia it says that the Western version of this is harder than the Japanese release, and maybe that's true, slightly, but there are some considerations that make me feel like it's the opposite. For one, everything moves at a much slower pace. It takes longer for things to be built, and you can't just rush to the first demon spawn point to seal it up. Towns have a population requirement before they can start sealing up these spawn points, and they're not going to be at it when you rush towards one immediately. Also, magic works differently here as well. In the Western release, you regained magic anytime the town progressed, or the clock reset, or you leveled up. You constantly gained more magic points to spend. in the original Japanese release, you only get more SP from killing enemies, so you can screw yourself over by sealing the spawn points too soon. Also, the Earthquake spell no longer destroys the low-level housing, it destroys all buildings at random, but I mentioned this before. So, I didn't know about any of this, and I thought it would be cute to play this game in Japanese since I've been studying it very seriously these past few months. I remember hearing the antagonist of the game was originally called Satan, and yeah, that's true. I also quite like how the angel assistant calls humans kawaii or cute a lot of the time. It's very endearing. And although it's easy to talk about censorship during the 16-bit era because there are so many examples of it, and pretty much all those examples are accurate, I think it's pretty amazing a game this obviously based on religion still managed to make its way to the West largely intact. Like, nobody is fooled about who you're playing as. The villagers still pray to an all-powerful lord from the heavens coming down to smite evil. It was quite uncommon for even this much to be okayed by Nintendo back in those days, and that is something that is worth remembering for a later video. All in all, I think the West got a much better version of Actraiser. I don't really mind games being difficult, but man, the Japanese version is just not fun. If, for whatever reason, you'd like to experience it without a language barrier, there is a patch that brings over the English script to the Japanese version, so you can still play it in English with the Japanese balancing. There is a sequel which took out the God Sim elements and focused on the action platforming, which in my eyes kind of just takes out what's interesting about this game. Even if you drastically improve both the gameplay and presentation, a lot goes missing without that genre merger. Actraiser might be especially crude about everything, but a lot of what makes Quintet good was already present in this game. It's very impressive for a new company's first outing on an unfamiliar platform. There's also a recent remake of Actraiser, something that always felt like an impossibility because the rights to Quintet's games have been up in the air for ages now. Square does want to re-release and do new things with these games, but supposedly it's very difficult due to rights issues. We may cover the remake at some point in the future, but for now I want to focus on the Super Nintendo games. Though I am skipping over Actraiser 2, it's not in my realm of interest. I do want to touch on Robotrek though, that game is fun. So, do I recommend Actraiser? Yeah, it's still pretty good. It's not a long game either, even if the pacing is a little off, though that's something you kind of have to get used to with every Quintet game in one form or another. They do reward you for your patience though. I'd like to say that nobody ever made anything like this again, but the blend of action RPG with town building is something that has come back in multiple shapes and forms, even years after Quintet disappeared. They definitely left their mark with this. Anyway, there's no poll this time, and apologies for taking so long for a video about a game this short. Study brain really took over. I've barely played games outside of this when I started getting good momentum with my Japanese studies. Next time, we're going to start off the trilogy for real.